Right, folks. For those tuning in, make sure to drop a like button, to share this live stream, as well as to drop a little comment letting us know where. And then we go click live here on Instagram. Yeah, let us know where you're tuning in from. Dimitri, are you still in Greece right now?
Yes, I am. I'm in Kalamata. Where are you at?
I'm currently in Riga, Latvia, which is formerly part of the Soviet Union. It's one of the few Soviet countries or post-Soviet countries that were missing on my list. And just like many of the Baltic states, there's quite a particular place to be in. So first of all, well, the first thing is that when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, or when Latvia withdrew from the Soviet Union, or what they claim got their re-independence, but not sure for how long that lasted since they joined NATO and became stooges of the empire. But then again, 15% or 20% of the population, well, basically they did a citizenship test for the non-Latvian ethnics of the country. And that test consisted of doing like a language test and a constitutional test, which many of these so-called non-ethnic Latvians decided not to do the test, and were then not given citizenship. So currently around 300,000 people in Latvia do not have Latvian citizenship. And this is a way that the state used to discriminate against ethnic Russians and to do some sort of loyalty test. And what's quite surprising as well is that many people within the leftist networks don't see any issues with having people without citizenship. I mean, I've heard comments about the non-citizens of Latvia that would almost, I mean, this is something I probably would have wished to be able to say about immigrants in the United States. So there's definitely it's quite shocking, the state of Latvia and what they're ready to do to just oppose Russians, not even Russia, just oppose Russians. And even more so, Dimitri, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but over the last, I believe since Sunday or Saturday, Lithuania fully disconnected themselves from the Russian electricity grid and fully integrated with the European one. And
the one that's running out of energy.
Right.
So yeah, I saw this. I saw the former Estonian prime minister, who's now the, I guess, the foreign minister, the equivalent of the foreign minister for the EU, was bragging about this. And I replied to her post on X about this, saying that, you're not making, she claimed that she was liberating Europe. And I said, you're not making Europe more free by making it increasingly dependent on LNG from the United States. But I guess she sees the world differently. At the end of the day, you want to have a reliable and an affordable supply of energy for your people. And if you're paying more to get it from the United States than from Russia, and also doing more damage to your environment, I don't see how that's a win for the people of Europe. But hey, what do I know?
Dimitri, there's this video from the president of Lithuania talking on the phone to probably some head of the electricity supply or something along those lines, and his comments are quite funny. He says, "Goodbye Russia, goodbye Lenin." So just quickly,
goodbye Russia, goodbye Russia, goodbye Lenin. Actually, he made it. He made it.
So, hello Washington, hello Washington, hello Washington. We belong to you now. Well,
Dimitri, just beyond hello Washington, hello insane electricity prices. Look at how the prices of electricity has fluctuated ever since. So we see here, right? These are the prices. I think this screenshot was either earlier today or yesterday, we see here that we compare the prices of Sweden, Norway, Denmark, and then we have Estonia at 150 euros, Lithuania 150 euros, and Latvia as well. Now, obviously, they're a bit inflated because of the whole transition happened overnight. But then again, how much cheaper can we expect it to go down over the next few days? Probably not so much. So beyond goodbye Lenin, obviously Lenin was someone who brought in cheap commodities to the people of the Soviet Union. So he's right. Goodbye Lenin, and hello shareholder profits. Hello pleasing energy companies that are probably based somewhere in Texas or God knows where. So it's I feel bad for the working class people of Latvia, Lithuania, the Baltic states. They're getting played. All this so that they could keep what's it called again, LARPing or cosplaying in some imaginary war against Russia, which they're end up paying the price for it.
Yeah. Well, as Trump says, drill, baby, drill. I guess that's the solution for Europe, although I don't know that Europe has any substantial deposits to drill into at this stage.
Just one last thing is that in Latvia, there's this form of revisionism where they equate communism to Nazism, where, I mean, it's illegal to show any communist symbols. Hopefully no one looks into my bag since I just came back from Leninland and I have a few USSR shirts in my bag. But then again, it's completely illegal. And the legacy, the particularity of the Holocaust and the war crimes that the Nazis have committed has been reduced to a footnote in the history books in the Baltic states, where they compare it as nothing worse than what they call Soviet occupation. The Soviet occupation, which built schools and hospitals and jobs for everyone. So right. It's truly it's a mockery, truly a mockery to see this. And don't forget that there's this speech that Putin did, and I think in one of those Sochi conferences where he says, "Don't forget who liberated Europe from the Nazis. Was it the British or the French? It was the Red Army, right? So they stormed Berlin. They went to the Reichstag. So it's what a time to be alive here in the Baltic states."
Right. So should we move on to the subject of Palestine?
Absolutely, Dimitri.
Okay, so as we're not going to replay all of these odious videos of the Donald announcing his ethnic cleansing plan for Gaza. And just to be clear, if you look back at news reports from as early as October 2023, you can easily ascertain that this too was the plan of the Biden administration. They wanted to force as many Palestinians out of Gaza into the Sinai. There was a lot of press coverage about this, but they were trying to, conceal their intentions, whereas the Donald has no scruples whatsoever about openly declaring that he's going to clean out Gaza, as if, the Palestinian people there are, refuse. I mean, what does it mean when you say clean out something? It means you're going to remove the dirt. I mean, that's how offensive this man's attitude towards the Palestinian people are. And he's being open about it. The project remains the same. It's just a certain level of audacity in terms of Trump's commentary that you didn't see with the Biden administration, which was, or tried to be more deceptive about it. In any event, what we want to focus on today, we're not going to replay, as I said, all of those odious Trump videos. I want to talk about, with Rami, the reaction in the non-Western world to Trump's brazen declaration of an ethnic cleansing plan for Gaza. And we'd like to start by showing you a very interesting interview that the former head of Saudi intelligence, a man by the name of Al-Turki, had with Christian Amanpour a few days ago. And could you pull up video 1, please?
Welcome to the program. You have been digesting what came from the White House last night. You probably heard the view from Ramallah. So is there going to be a united Arab front against this Trump vision?
Thank you, Ms. Amanpour, for inviting me. After hearing Mr. Barghouti, I really don't know what to add to what he said, other than to say that what came out of Mr. Trump is not digestible. I respectfully decline to add more disrespectful comments to that. But it is a fantasy to think that ethnic cleansing in the 21st century can be condoned by a world community that stays on its behinds and does not respond to that. The problem in Palestine is not the Palestinians. It is the Israeli occupation. And this has been clear and understood by everybody. Hence, you have United Nations resolutions calling for the quid pro quo of land for peace from 1967 until now. The Arab Peace Initiative, of course, is based on that and offered Israel not only diplomatic relation, but all of the things that Israel wanted, from trade, from normalization, etc., in return for the establishment of a Palestinian state with its capital in East Jerusalem. All of these things were American policy until this latest wording that Mr. Trump has chosen to use in claiming that he wants to better things, when actually it is going to turn things into more conflict and more bloodshed.
So we didn't play the whole interview there, but he goes on to refer to the Trump's plan as the mad ethnic cleansing plan. Now, of course, and I can see this in the comments, and it's entirely fair commentary, you know, who trusts the Saudis, or how can anybody trust the Saudis when it comes to the well-being of the Palestinian people? With a sentiment with which, you know, I agree completely, and I'm sure Rami would agree as well. But the thing is, this man is a person who had a very important position within the Saudi regime. I doubt that he would make these comments calling this a mad ethnic cleansing plan without the approval of the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. And although it's entirely possible that the Saudi regime is going to turn around and stab the Palestinian people in the back, it's really hard for them to walk back this type of commentary, you know, and suddenly do a normalization deal with Israel after Gaza has been ethnically cleansed. If their intention was to do that, it's hard to understand why they would be using this kind of harsh commentary and saying point blank, there will be no normalization deal. And they've said it again and again, including in the last few days, until the Palestinian people have a state. So I think this is meaningful. I don't trust the Saudis. I'm going to get back to why I think it's meaningful when we finish reviewing commentary from, you know, the autocrats of Egypt and Jordan, which we're about to do. But I'm just curious, Rami, what was your reaction to this this spiel by Al-Turki?
My first reaction is that whether this is a victory or not, we'll discuss this a bit later on, but clearly the tone has changed since October 7th. The Palestinian people on October 7th had a duty to slow down Arab normalization of Israel. And Saudi Arabia was flirting with this idea. They probably still are. Whether these statements are honest or not, it's most likely not as honest as the Turkey claims to make it seem. But this is clearly demonstrating that the Palestinian people, the people of Gaza, are keeping these autocrats, these dictators in check. And the Saudi government now needs to mitigate and balance pressure from the Palestinians and also pressure from their own people, in knowing that if the Palestinian people are ethnically cleansed, then the custodians of Mecca and Medina, right, the Saudi regime, will be held accountable. So it might mean that there's going to be forms of normalization that will be done differently and not an outright one as they may be intended to do so before October 7th. But then again, Al-Turki keeps referring to the two-state solution, these accords that have been agreed upon since the 1980s or 1990s. And I feel like it's disgenuine that we keep playing the same broken record. Like nothing is, like the people in Gaza are now employing new methods to protect their own rights, and the Saudis are still playing within the boundaries that the Americans let them to play around, which is you need to talk about a two-state solution. Now, there was this other comment where he says we need to throw the Israelis back into Alaska. This is, I believe, a better way of dealing with this issue, is that you need to start discussing, we need to stir things around and can't be using back the same tactics that have obviously put the Palestinians in the place that they're in today. So that were my initial thoughts hearing Al-Turki speak.
Okay. So let's go to the next autocrat, US-backed autocrat, Al-Sisi, the president of Egypt, and Trump likes to refer to him as the general, or during his first administration, he called him his favorite dictator. What did he actually did that? What did Sisi have to say?
بشأن موضوع تهجير الفلسطينيين، وأود أن أطمئن الشعب المصري بأنه لا يمكن أبدا التساهل أو السماح بالبساس بالأمن القومي المصري، وأطمئنكم بأننا عازمون على العمل مع الرئيس ترامب، وهو يرغب في تحقيق السلام، التوصل إلى السلام المنشود القائم على حل الدولتين. ونرى أن الرئيس ترامب قادر على تحقيق ذلك الغرض الذي طال انتظاره بإحلال السلام العادل الدائم في منطقة الشرق الأوسط. حل هذه الأزمة اللي جاءت هذا الظلم التاريخي مش إخراج الشعب الفلسطيني من مكانه، لا، هو أن يبقى في حل للدولتين جنبا إلى جنب، أمن وسلام للمواطن الإسرائيلي وأمن وأمان للمواطن الفلسطيني. الظلم التاريخي اللي وقع على الفلسطينيين وتم تهجيرهم قبل كده ولم يرجعوا إلى مناطق ثبت أو سبق التأكيد لهم إن هم ممكن يرجعوا تاني بعد ما يتم تعميرها. هل ممكن الكلام ده يتكرر مرة تاني؟ أنا ما افتكرش. وبقول إن الشعب المصري لو أنا طلبت منه هذا الأمر هيخرج كله في الشارع المصري ويقول لي لا، لا تشارك في ظلم، لا تشارك في ظلم.
So I think that last part was really the punchline, right? If he said very clearly, we're not on board with this project, this is an injustice. But at the very end, he said, if I did this, the Egyptian people would take to the streets and they would say, we will take no part in this injustice. And of course, some of us, not you, Rami, but me, I'm old enough to remember that the assassination of Sadat, the Egyptian president, after he did a collaborationist peace deal with Israel, by people who were upset about that. And of course, there was also the overthrow of the Shah of Iran, who was a U.S. puppet for many years, very much a collaborationist with the Israeli regime. He was overthrown in the Islamic Revolution. And there have been other instances of the people rising up. I don't think Sisi or Al-Turki or Mohammed bin Salman or the Jordanian autocrat we're about to hear from his foreign minister have a particular commitment to justice for the Palestinian people. I think it would be naive of us to believe that at this stage. But they do care about their own power and their own wealth. And I think that was really sort of highlighted at the very end there of Sisi's comments, where he talked about a potential, he didn't use the word uprising, but he talked very much about Egyptians taking to the streets and revolting against any policy of facilitating the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. How did you read his comments, Rodney?
Dimitri, the first thing he mentioned is that displacing the Palestinians is a national security threat to Egypt. So this is not a benevolent leader who's coming to the defense of the Palestinian people. He's coming to the defense of Egypt. First of all, he sees the Palestinians as a source of instability, which might be true if we're exiled from our own land. But he understands that the conflict will now be moved away from Gaza and into Egypt, whether the Palestinians throw attacks towards Israel from Egyptian territory, or even if they start instability within Egypt and wanting to overthrow Sisi, the Palestinians rightfully worked against the dictatorship in Jordan by trying to overthrow the Jordanian leadership during Black October. And in Lebanon as well, the Palestinians were quite mobilized in trying to get their rights brought back to them. So Sisi is clearly saying that this has nothing to do with Palestine at the beginning and all to do with Egyptian national security.
In other words, his own security. I think that's what he's most concerned with.
Exactly. Now, then again, the Sisi is mentioning that. Sisi is mentioning that he's scared of that his people are going to take him down if he is to accept the forced displacement of the Palestinians. But this is not the first time that Sisi would have gone against his own people and do massacres to bring down protests. He did it in Rabaa Square, amongst many other protests that were held against his rule. So I wouldn't discount that. But then again, he keeps talking about the two-state solution. And there's a bit of a big similarity between what Al-Turki was saying and what Sisi was saying as well. And it's that they're all still talking within the parameters that the Americans let them to speak towards. Escalate this, stir things around. This is not the time to speak about two-state. This is about bringing justice to the Palestinians. So they're not showing any leverage or new tools that would be available to them to enforce the rights that the Palestinians have. They're basically putting their cards on the table, and it's the same cards that they've always put there, and that has brought nothing at all. So this is my initial concerns, and we could talk more about this, but Dimitri, I think we're going to probably drill this further later on, about the only people who will bring any form of justice to the Palestinian people are the Palestinians themselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We'll get into that some more in a moment. Let's go to the Jordanian foreign minister, shall we? And interestingly, before you start this video, I just want to comment as someone who is a Greek citizen, not just a Canadian citizen, spends a lot of time in Greece. I found it interesting that he gave this speech standing beside the Greek foreign minister, who is a complete and utter vassal of the United States and is 100% complicit in the genocide in Gaza in a variety of ways, which I've spoken about in other programs and episodes. But it's interesting to watch his body language, the Greek foreign minister, as the Jordanian foreign minister is diplomatically saying, no, we're not going to agree to this. Please go ahead and play the clip, Rami. Thank you.
Our determination to ensure that the ceasefire holds, that enough humanitarian supplies enter Gaza so that the humanitarian catastrophe is addressed, and then to move forward towards achieving the just and lasting peace that is a necessity for the region and for the world on the basis of the two-state solution. I briefed the minister on the outcome of our meeting in Cairo, which reiterated our collective commitment to achieving just peace on the basis of the two-state solution that will ensure that Palestinians stay on their land and that Israel gets the security that it deserves as well within the context of the two-state solution that the whole world supports. And as you know, we made a clear announcement in that meeting that we're going to continue to work with our partners, whether in the US or in Europe, and we sent a letter to the US Secretary of State again, saying that we're partners in the pursuit of a just and lasting peace in the region, and we're ready to work with the Trump administration to bring about that peace. President Trump says he wants to bring about peace to the region, and we are partners to him and to his administration in this effort, and we'll do whatever it takes from our side to make sure that we put solutions at the table and that we move forward in a very practical and meaningful way towards ending the conflict and achieving the peace that has eluded us, hopefully under the Trump administration.
Yeah, so let me say, first of all, that the Jordanian foreign minister has taken ass-kissing to an art form. He's really elevated it to a level of artistry that is difficult to surpass. But nonetheless, I have to say that I think of the three of these autocrats, the Saudi crown prince, the Egyptian dictator, and the Jordanian king, as they refer to him, he's in the weakest position. The Jordanian autocrat is, first of all, very dependent, much more dependent, I think, on the United States and Israel for various forms of sustenance than Egypt and especially Saudi Arabia. And it's interesting to see sort of the level of aggression in their commentary. I thought the most aggressive commentary came from al-Turki, who, as I said, referred to this as a mad ethnic cleansing plan in that interview with Christian Amanpour. And then you had Sisi, who was saying, look, the Egyptian people are going to rise up. This is a historic injustice. We can't countenance this. And then you had the extremely weak and vulnerable Jordanian autocrats, foreign ministers saying, and these were the key words, we have to ensure that the Palestinian people remain on their land. That was the money shot. And at other points, they've actually gone further than that and suggested that the expulsion of the Palestinians from the West Bank into Jordan would amount to a declaration of war. So they have had occasion to use harsher language than you heard there. But all three of them, and I think these are probably, when it comes to the question of expelling Palestinians from Gaza, these are probably the three most important Arab states: Egypt and Jordan, because they border on Israel, and Saudi Arabia because of its economic and military power amongst the Arab states. So all three of them, you've heard in various forms, with various intonations, are saying, we will not accept this. And before we move on, because I'd like to now, talk about how Russia and China are reacting to this and the interplay of their commentary with the Arab states. What did you make of this commentary from the Jordanian autocrats foreign minister, Rami?
Dimitri, I feel like I've heard 3 times the same speech by different people. And this is why I think there's truly no substance. The Jordanian leader says the 2-state solution that everyone supports. Well, clearly Trump doesn't support it. He's talking about ethnic cleansing. And I think that there's something very wary of bringing the subject of ethnic cleansing up front, because it's a distraction of what this ongoing struggle is about. And I think it maybe gives leeway for the Saudi regime to do exactly what the UAE did in 2020 when they claimed to have normalized with Israel to stop a war on Gaza, right? So it's like a bit of maybe carrot and sticks, not the best analogy here, but maybe we could see the Saudi Arabians normalizing with Israel just to avoid and claim that it's a victory because they were able to stop the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. So those are all things that don't get me too impressed, although it's great to hear people talk about about condemning the fact that Palestinians should not be removed from their own land. But then again, these people have stayed silent during a genocide. These people have not provided any form of military support. And Saudi Arabia took advantage, was entirely responsible for the situation in Syria while this genocide was happening along with Qatar. So I'm not super impressed by what we just heard.
Yeah, I guess I'm going to push back a little bit on that, because I don't think they've been silent. It's true that their actions have not matched their rhetoric. But in November of, just to give you an example, in November of last year, the Saudi crown prince himself described what Israel was doing as a genocide. And I don't know how you normalize with Israel after you've said that it's committing a genocide and the Palestinian people are being expelled from their land. I think that would be political suicide, frankly, for the Saudi autocrat. If he was trying to fool his people into believing that there was some justification for what Israel is doing, maybe he could get by. He could survive collaboration with the expulsion of the Palestinian people. But when he himself has characterized this as a genocide, to normalize with Israel after it has actually carried out the expulsion of Palestinians from Gaza and or the West Bank, I believe that would probably be political suicide for the Saudi autocrat.
Beyond these words, I believe that while the Red Sea was shut down by the resistance in Yemen, they created a land tunnel through Saudi Arabia. And the Saudi Arabians historically have shown that they could put the West on their knees just by closing the valves of their oil pipelines and to cut production. Maybe that would be the right time to do something along those lines, to put the pressure that is needed to put an end to this genocide. If we know there's one thing Americans like more than Israel, it's a proper flow of oil. So this is the biggest leverage Saudi Arabia has. It has nothing to do with any military support for the resistance in Gaza, and they could just turn it off for 1 hour and see what kind of earthquake that will have in the region. So this is what I.
Yeah. So let's continue with, because I think this is a very interesting conversation we're having, and I want to be very clear. I'm going to repeat again. I have zero trust in any of these autocrats, and I readily acknowledge that any or all of them could stab the Palestinian people in the back again. But I tend to think that we're in new territory now. And even though they haven't backed up their rhetoric with actions by, for example, cutting off the flow of oil, sanctioning Israel and so forth, they are in a really, really difficult place right now because of the audacity of what Trump is saying and doing, with the full, backing of the genocidal entity. I think it's important to recall that these autocrats are not omnipotent. They can be overthrown. Now, it may be very costly to the people to try to overthrow them. And I'm sure it would be, whether you're talking about the people of Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Jordan. But at the end of the day, when you reach a point as an ordinary citizen where you think that subservience to the autocrat is more painful than, the cost of revolting, you'll revolt. And at some point, we're going to reach that stage where, many people living under the burden of this rule, of these autocratic rulers backed up by the West, say, we're not going to take it anymore. And however painful it's going to be, we are going to revolt. And I think that they're aware of that. I think that they understand that they're currently skating on very thin ice politically. So this brings us to the other game in town, as I like to call it, which is the BRICS. So why don't we, first of all, play the clip, Rami, of the Russian Federation's ambassador to the United Nations, a gentleman by the name of Nebenzia, who was caught by some journalists as he was walking through the halls of the UN in New York City and asked about Trump's ethnic cleansing plan.
Ambassador, Donald Trump is meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu right now, and Donald Trump.
He never reported to me yet.
No comment, sir. Ambassador, Donald Trump is saying that Palestinians must be resettled out of Gaza to live somewhere else.
I think this is out of question. The Palestinians do not want it. The world community doesn't want it, and you cannot forcefully resettle someone somewhere. The Palestinians suffered so much injustice in their existence that this one, on top of all the others, will be a real shame.
Ambassador, but he says Trump has been saying that it's impossible to live in Gaza now. He's even saying even for the Israeli will be impossible.
We were told by our briefers today that Palestinians vote with their feet. They return back to the places where they used to live, despite all the damage that has been done, despite all the rubble that is around them. They want to live in the place which they belong, which they consider their home.
If everything is ruined now, today, I mean.
Even now, you saw the number of people, the columns that are going to the north, to the places where they habitate. They want to live.
But it's dangerous. Maybe come back, but
what's your solution? Do you want to resettle them too, as President
no, means
Trump
like,
wants?
but like somebody says maybe to fix something and then they can go live there. But to live now, today, now there, could it be dangerous?
They lived in awful conditions all this time before this ceasefire, which still remains very fragile. and they managed to sustain and to survive in these conditions. Now, at least, they have a little respite with the ceasefire, which hopefully will.
Would Russia help to reconstruct?
We will help, of course, but for that we need to have sustainable, not just ceasefire, but no military operations, because you rebuild something next day, it is destroyed.
Do you think Jordan and Egypt should take in these 2 million Palestinians?
Ask Jordan and Egypt about it, but they already said it themselves that they are not buying this plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Sorry, Dimitri.
Sorry, go ahead, Rami.
It's just extremely comical how the journalists are kind of normalizing the idea of ethnic cleansing, trying to engineering it to work.
Yeah, they're legitimizing the idea that expelling Palestinians from Gaza would be a humanitarian gesture. I mean, these people have absolutely no scruples, no conscience, nothing. There's no recognition that Israel created the conditions that currently exist there.
This is a crime against humanity. And it's just being like enforced and trying to make sense of it. And how could we like move the pieces and do some geometrical transfusions or whatever it is, that word, to find a way to get the Palestinians off of their rightful land. These were people that were we saw total destruction in Gaza, and we're saying, well, there's too much destruction. How can they live? Sanction the people that caused destruction.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Absolutely.
like we're not focused on the right issues here.
And who in the mainstream media, the so-called mainstream media, ever is around me? I mean, these people are so bankrupt morally. It's hard to find the words anymore. Now, I think, would you agree with me? There was really I didn't hear anything in the comments of Ambassador Nebenzia which suggested flexibility on the question of the expulsion of Palestinians. He was unequivocal. No, it's totally unacceptable. The Palestinians want to stay, and we have no right to expel them from their land. And so did you hear any wiggle room in there? I didn't hear any wiggle room.
I think he even said that it's physically impossible. It's physically impossible to get the Palestinians off of their land. They resisted a genocide for a year and a half. And you think that now is a time to get them out of their land? Like, if anyone has shown that they will never move off of their land, it is the Palestinian people.
100%.
So there are other solutions. And some people were talking about sending the Israelis to Greenland and Alaska. I think that's a conversation we should be having. This one might be able to make more sense. We know when the Palestinians started resisting, they all fled to the airport. Palestinians haven't. So, I mean, there are definitely solutions to this conflict. We just need to be a bit more creative and maybe start with the people that have not as much right to this land as the indigenous people.
Right. So let's then turn to China before we talk about what all of this may mean. And now I found a video of a foreign ministry spokesperson speaking, but I thought that this article was much more revealing. It's an article from the South China Morning Post that came out in the last couple of days. If you could pull that up, Rami.
Yes.
And this article, I think, is quite telling for a couple of reasons. The first thing I want to note about this this piece, if you scroll, can you scroll down, Rami?
Yeah, I just kind of lost yeah, okay.
So if you can stop there, you'll see in the second paragraph, the Chinese Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs, thank you, said, quote, Gaza belongs to Palestinians and is an inseparable part of Palestinian territory. Then if you go down, any arrangements regarding the future of Gaza must respect the will of the Palestinian people. Then he's quoted as saying, China has always firmly supported the legitimate national rights of the Palestinian people and effective jurisdiction of the Palestinian Authority over all Palestinian territories, including Gaza and the West Bank. If you scroll down, he said, he added that Beijing would continue to maintain close communication and collaboration with Arab countries. And this is, for me, quite telling. Friday's meeting was held upon the request of Arab states, the Chinese foreign ministry said. So Arab states are going to China and looking for backing for the notion that the Palestinians must not be expelled from their land. They go on to say that the ambassadors had said they expected China to continue to play a constructive role in safeguarding international fairness and justice and supporting Palestine's legitimate national rights. And I just want to remind people, if you don't, and those who may not know this already, that before the International Court of Justice, the Chinese representative actually said within the last year that the Palestinian people have the right to armed resistance to achieve their dream of self-determination. So here you have the two most, certainly when it comes to military matters, I think Russia is the most important member of the BRICS. Economically, China is the most important member of the BRICS. And they are taking an unwavering position in support of Palestinian self-determination and against the despicable ethnic cleansing plan of Trump and Netanyahu. And, I think it bears pointing out here that Egypt and Saudi Arabia at the beginning of this year actually became members of the BRICS. And very recently, China mediated a reconciliation of sorts between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And throughout this 16 months of horror, that fragile détente it seems to have survived. There still is, diplomatic relations and a sort of era of détente between Iran and the Saudis, mediated by China. Now, it's not just about the fact that Egypt and Saudi Arabia are members of the BRICS. I think it's also important to point out the degree to which these three key countries in this dispute about the ethnic cleansing of Gaza have become economically integrated with China. Could we please pull up, this would be image 6, Saudi Arabia's main export partners. And you'll see there that, China accounts for 19% of Saudi Arabia's exports. And, the United States is way down there at 7%. It's, well under half of the percentage of exports accounted for by China. India is second place, and it too is a member of the BRICS. So, this, I can assure you, is going to give the Chinese a very significant degree of leverage with the Saudi autocracy. Now, can we look at the next?
Just quickly, I even think that China is one of the largest foreign investors in Saudi Aramco, the largest oil producer in the world.
Right, absolutely. And now let's look at Saudi Arabia's main import partners. This would be image number 7. And there you see that China accounts for 22% of Saudi Arabia's imports. The United States is, almost a quarter. I mean, a little more than a quarter of in terms of its accounting for imports to Saudi Arabia. So China has become much more important as a trading partner to Saudi Arabia than the United States has. And, it's taking a position which is clearly aligned with the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination and to remain on their land. Now, why don't we have a look, Rami, at the Jordanian situation, the top trading partners of Jordan. This would be image number 9. and you're going to find out, that China also plays an important role. On the export side, the United States is the most important partner, but when it comes to imports, it's China. China is the top source of imports into Jordan. And if Jordan had to replace whatever it's importing from China, it probably would have to pay, its people would have to pay significantly more. Presumably, the reason why China is becoming so important is because the imports are relatively inexpensive relative to competing products. And you'll see that when it comes to imports, the United States is well down the list, approximately a third of China. China's trading with Jordan. And finally, why don't we take a look at the statistics with respect to Egypt? This would be image number 8. So again, you can see there that the main import partner for Egypt by a huge margin is China, well over double the share of the United States. And the third one, equal to the United States, is Saudi Arabia. So, you have hugely important economic relations between China and these three states, and they're growing in importance. And, China has a tremendous amount of political and military heft as well, and is, as I say, taking a position which is unequivocally aligned with the right of Palestinian self-determination and the right of Palestinians to remain on their homeland. So, as I say, we are no longer in the world where the United States is the only game in town. If all of this had been happening 20 years ago, these autocrats in Egypt and Jordan and Saudi Arabia might feel that as politically perilous as it may be to collaborate with the expulsion of Palestinians from their homeland, they really don't have any alternative, because the United States is the only game in town. But that's simply no longer true. They have an alternative, which is arguably more important to them from an economic perspective. And just imagine how these leaders, how they feel when they contrast the way the Russians and the Chinese are speaking about this crisis to the way the Americans are speaking about this crisis. Trump is talking about it like he's developing a new casino in Gaza. He's talked about this being the new Riviera. They're looking at this man, they're saying, are you out of your mind? I mean, don't you have any sense of how this is being interpreted by the people of our region, how you're outraging them? And then they see the commentary coming from Nebenzia and the Chinese Foreign Ministry, and that is, perceived by the people in the region to be much more just, much more rational, much more pragmatic. And when you combine that with the increasing economic importance of China to the region, to West Asia, and also to the fact that Egypt and Saudi Arabia are now members of the BRICS, I think the landscape has changed. Now, again, I'm not going to exclude the possibility that these people will stab the Palestinian people in the back. I totally accept that that's a real danger, and they might end up doing that. But I don't think this is a given any longer. I think it's entirely possible that we're seeing a shift in the region, and that Trump has pushed the envelope too far. That's my read of it, for what it's worth. What are your thoughts, Rami?
Dimitri, well, my first thought is that I think Donald Trump said the quiet part out loud. This was always about ethnically cleansing the Palestinians off of their land, whether it is in Gaza or the West Bank. So what I'm mainly curious is that we spoke about this during the ICC and the ICJ court sessions, that one of the hardest parts in proving a case of genocide is the intent. Do you feel like these comments that Trump has been saying can be used against Israel and the United States, and also in their complicity in this genocide, by clearly demonstrating the intent to get the Palestinians off of their land and to ethnically cleanse them?
As a legal matter, 100%. 100%. This is flagrantly unlawful, a straight up violation of international law, of the Fourth Geneva Convention, of the Rome Statute, you name it. These people have just handed, if you're a prosecutor seeking to obtain a judgment against the United States and Israel for committing crimes against humanity, they've just handed you evidence on a golden platter.
Just that statement alone.
Yeah. So I think that this is, I really believe that this is a bridge too far. That's my sense of it. And I want to say one other thing, because as I was walking out the door, my partner Farida said something to me which I thought was really insightful. She said, I've been listening to Trump and I've come to the conclusion that Trump is a really failed businessman. And I'm thinking about that. And, in an earlier stage of my career, when I was working on Wall Street, then I was a securities class actions lawyer, and I was, suing large corporations. I had a lot of interactions with, business people who were quite successful. And I'll tell you, they didn't talk like Trump. However despicable they may have been, however, greedy they may have been, however unscrupulous they may have been, they at least had a certain degree of diplomacy in their language and their business dealings. Even in the business world, I don't think that this type of language would be conducive to success. Trump is not even, everybody says, Trump is a businessman. He sees it. Well, actually, he isn't. From a business perspective, people don't talk this way. This is not conducive to constructive commercial relationships, however greedy you may be. So I think that Trump is, the proverbial bull in the China shop, and the China shop is now run by China, and so they're not going to. I don't think this whole nefarious plan stands much prospect of success, and it may end up hastening the demise of the power of the United States in West Asia.
Dimitri, I know we intentionally didn't speak about what the Western leaders had to say about Trump, but one of them, that I feel like we should pay a bit of attention to, is Germany condemning the Trump's goal to ethnically cleanse Palestinians off of Gaza. But it's absurd considering that the second largest supplier of weapons to the apartheid state, the Zionist entity, is Germany themselves. So Germans are against ethnic cleansing in words, right? They don't like it when Trump speaks this way, but they have no problem with supplying the weapons that have made ethnic cleansing possible. But as much as these words from Trump seem alarming, and of course they are condemnable and don't help the cause, let's keep in mind that the true people who own the key to the liberation of Palestine are the people that are resisting. And I feel like this might be some psyops to get us pessimistic in some way, but we just need to realize that Israel evacuated from the Netzarim corridor. And these are victories that are coming in while Trump is talking, the Palestinian people are acting. And I've never been this motivated in seeing the Palestinians in their resisting, hundreds and if not thousands of Palestinian prisoners now leaving the dungeons that they were being kept in for decades. So truly, Trump can speak, but the Palestinians own their own narrative.
Correct. Absolutely. I said this before, Rami. I couldn't agree. Ultimately, the Palestinian people will liberate themselves. That's where this is ultimately.
Just before we change subjects, I just wanted to, this was Netanyahu's trip to Washington. So I don't know if you saw this, Dimitri, but some people were analyzing the flight path that Netanyahu took to get to Washington, and he purposely picked certain countries to fly over out of fear of getting arrested. So I just wanted to maybe quickly, if we have the time, to share this over.
I've not seen this. This is interesting. Please share that with us.
Yeah, so I need to click on share screen, share a tab. So if we just restart it here. And this is Netanyahu leaving through Tel Aviv, flies briefly over, I think this is Greece, Italy, France. All of these countries are signatories, right, to the Rome Statute. And now I was hearing from the Cradle that they purposefully skipped flying through Canada because Canada could have maybe done something along those lines. This is what the Cradle reported, and it was, I think, article recorded by Cannes Broadcasting, right? So, and then straight to Washington. I don't know. These countries, Dimitri, I believe, have an obligation to arrest Netanyahu. Oh, shit, I wasn't sharing my screen. Or was I sharing?
I just shared it. But can you go back? Because we didn't see, it wasn't on the screen when you showed the departure from Tel Aviv. Yeah, so look, can we just stop there?
Yeah.
Yeah, why am I not surprised that that flight passed over Greece? I mean, what a disgrace. You know, the Greek government is in every conceivable way complicit with this genocide. Just right here, I would say about 5 kilometers from where I'm currently sitting, on the outskirts of the town of Kalamata, there is an Air Force base of the Greek Air Force. And at that Air Force base, there is a contingent of trainers from the Israeli drone manufacturer Elbit Systems, and they are training Greek pilots how to use Israeli drones, just 5 kilometers from here. I could go on and on. This government is an utter disgrace. It has brought shame upon the Greek people, and I cannot condemn it strongly enough. And then we see, it's going over Giorgia Meloni territory. She's a huge fan of the genocidal regime. And of course, there's Macron, who supported Israel's monstrosities in every conceivable way. It is interesting, I guess, I think typically these transatlantic flights, Rami, they generally do fly over the maritime provinces of Canada. So that is a bit odd that they didn't do that. But that might have been done not necessarily because Netanyahu believed that the Canadians would force his airplane down and arrest him, but because the Trudeau regime simply asked him not to embarrass the government.
Especially if it's not necessary, right? So for the case of Italy, France, maybe they kind of had to. If it was not France, it would have been like Spain and Portugal. We know that these people would have maybe condemned it a bit more. But then again, France and Italy, and I assume Greece as well, have an obligation to stop that plane, force him to land, and go straight to the Hague.
They are all members of the ICC, the Rome Statute. They all.
But by the way, if I'm curious, Dimitri, if this was Putin on the airplane, what would have happened?
I wouldn't have put my money on Putin getting through. Somebody probably would have intervened, but I don't think it would necessarily have been Greece. They wouldn't have wanted to take on Russia. But would France?
We have the Baltic. You call what's his name again? Poiliev, the barking Chihuahua. Well, the Baltic states would have played that role and sacrificing themselves to arrest Putin.
Right. Yeah. So, shall we say a few words before we go to the Q&A about Lebanon, Rami?
Yes.
Right. So I just want to, one comment about the Lebanese situation. Of course, the ceasefire expired, the 60-day ceasefire in late January. The genocidal entity, Israel's genocidal entity, was supposed to withdraw its forces from Lebanon. It didn't. They're still there, although not occupying much territory, but they're still on Lebanese territory, which they occupied during the course of the ceasefire. They took advantage of the ceasefire to actually take control of land that they were unable to take control of when the resistance was battling them in South Lebanon. They violated the ceasefire flagrantly over 1,000 times, killing dozens of civilians. They continue to bomb Lebanon. I just have to comment on this shtick. I call it the shtick, where the United States pretends to be in a position to mediate the resolution of conflicts when it is itself a direct or indirect party to the conflict. We're seeing this right now in three very, very important and destructive conflicts. There's the Ukraine war, where you have Trump pretending to be a mediator between Zelensky and Putin, even though the United States government, right up until the current day, is providing weapons and economic aid to Ukraine, has trained tens of thousands of Ukrainian soldiers, has provided real-time battlefield intelligence to the Ukrainians, has allowed thousands of soldiers who have served in the United States military to fight alongside Ukrainians on the battlefield. No sensible party to a conflict would regard the United States as being a neutral arbiter in the dispute between Ukraine and Russia. And the same is true, of course, when it comes to the conflict between Palestinians and Israelis. They're not a neutral party. They are 100% supportive. And in fact, I would say that they're actually of the genocide in Gaza, the United States government. That's how deeply involved they are in the destruction of Gaza. And now you have the US president saying, we're going to take over Gaza and we are going to clean out the Palestinians. I mean, for them to be acting as though in Washington, they're in some kind of a position to mediate a resolution of this conflict is laughable. And then you have Lebanon, where they sent this character, Amish Hochstein, as an envoy of the Biden administration to quote unquote mediate this ceasefire, which Israel has treated like toilet paper, even though he himself was a former Israeli soldier and was acting at the behest of the Biden administration, which was supporting Israel's destruction of South Lebanon. So we shouldn't buy this shtick, people. It is a complete fraud. The United States is not a mediator, a credible mediator, a plausible mediator in any of these conflicts. It is a belligerent, it is a party to the conflict. And if these things are going to get resolved, it's not going to be by the US posing as some kind of a neutral arbiter. It isn't. And this is, abundantly clear in Lebanon. And by the way, I plan to travel to Lebanon next week. I haven't been there in a few months. I plan to, the funeral of Hassan Nasrallah, the assassinated former leader of Hezbollah, the Islamic resistance in Lebanon, is scheduled to take place next week. But I also want to visit areas of South Lebanon to see what is going on there, and particularly if we can get close to those areas that are currently being occupied by the military forces of the genocidal entity. And I hope, Rami, that you'll be able to join me.
Yes, absolutely. And also, Dimitri, on a similar note, I don't know if you've been following the border clashes between HTS and Lebanese militias, basically in conjunction with Israel, that is bombing supply lines between Syria and Lebanon. So if there were any more proof that Israel's control of Syrian land is meant to kind of suffocate Lebanon up to the Netzarim corridor, to block access to homes, and to then do joint attacks between HTS and Israel to then bomb these supply lines. There's never been more evidence of that. So if there were anyone who had any doubts that the Syrian occupiers, the occupiers of Syria, HTS, is working hands in hands and de facto recognizing Israel by doing so, by doing joint military attacks against Lebanon.
Yeah, they're fighting against fellow Arabs who have resisted Israel's aggressions, but they're doing nothing to oppose Israel's theft of Syrian land. That tells you all you need to know about these so-called rebels. I think quite clearly they're proxies of the United States, Israel, and Turkey.
So we could open the floor for Q&A. So folks,
I just want to mention, I just saw some comments. Someone asked about Laith. Yes, I will be seeing Laith Marouf when I am in Lebanon. Also, we'll be seeing our comrade Hadi Hotait, a Lebanese journalist who's guided us through South Lebanon. And I hope you'll tune in next week when we'll be doing various interviews, from the south of the country. So shall we go to Q&A?
Yes. So folks, maybe put some question marks at the beginning. Try to make it obvious, just because it's kind of hard to keep track of the chat. So yes, we will be taking questions. I already took a few of them down from the previous, earlier in from our discussions. First question that I had is, the first question is from Daniel Drazinovich, who says, how does Israel get away with not letting aid in?
Yeah, my understanding, Daniel, is that there is some aid, and there appears to be an increase over what was getting in before the ceasefire. But the reports I've seen also suggest that it's not nearly close to the, I believe that the ceasefire agreement provided for 600 trucks of aid per day, and the pre-genocide average daily number was about 500. And it seems that, most of that Israel is not complying with that requirement, unsurprisingly. For reasons I've just stated, no one should expect that the United States is going to force Israel to provide the amount of aid that it required to provide. The more interesting question is why does Hamas continue to release Israeli detainees, even though Israel is not complying with this? And I think that they're basically, my guess is that they're looking at, there's a cost benefit analysis, and although Israel is violating this provision of the agreement, amongst others, the cost they're calculating to the resistance and to the Palestinian people in Gaza of terminating the ceasefire deal because of Israel's non-compliance with the aid provisions would be too high. And so, at least for the time being, they're continuing to release detainees, even though the aid is not coming in. How long that's going to last, however, is an open question. It may get to the point, Israel it's developed, it's turned into an art form, the whole process of tanking ceasefire deals. And they're to continue to push the envelope, and try to provoke a reaction of Hamas, which they can then use as a pretext to continue to resume the wholesale bombing and destruction of Gaza. And so I'm sure that the resistance leaders in Gaza are aware of this past practice on the part of Israel. And so every day they're assessing the situation and asking whether Israel has gone so far that they have no alternative but to cease the release of detainees. I think it's really sort of a day-by-day thing at this stage.
I had another question here that was quite interesting, it's from Tommy Two Gloves, who says, where is the moral outrage over killing pregnant women and children? So I'm not sure if it was yesterday or 2 days ago. Israel killed a 8-month pregnant woman in the West Bank. I don't have all of the details concerning this, but I actually looked it up online to see what kind of headlines would we be able to find about this story. And in the Western media channels, there's really no, these articles are not being shared. Al Jazeera and a couple of Israeli media platforms were covering the story, but I believe CNN, Canadian News, American News, French News were not really reporting about this. It was on X. Many people were reporting about this through alternative media platforms. But truly, if this would have been an Israeli pregnant woman killed, we would be hearing about this for the next 2-3 years.
Yeah, and in the so-called mainstream discourse, there's no moral outrage in the West. These atrocities, these heinous atrocities, are ignored or minimized, or even worse, they try to conjure up some justification for them. But always, it's important to distinguish between how the media and the political and the economic elites in the West respond to these atrocities and how ordinary people feel about them. And I think there is a tremendous amount of moral outrage, particularly in the non-Western world, and especially in West Asia itself. I think people are keenly aware of these monstrosities. And I think that is a big part of the reason why these autocrats feel very threatened at the moment. They understand that their populations are seething with anger. They are watching these reports. They do care about these reports in the Arab world and beyond the Arab world.
So the next question.
There's a question there from Paul Ambrose about genocide Justin.
Yes. So this is the one. Dimitri, has genocide Justin said anything about Trump's plan?
I have not seen any commentary by Trump, by Trudeau, Genocide Justin, as he's rightly called, about Trump's ethnic cleansing plan. However, and I might have missed it, but I've not seen anything. I did see a comment by Mark Carney, who is, I think the leading candidate right now to replace Trudeau as Liberal Party leader. And he did criticize it unequivocally. I saw the comment on X and I replied to it by asking him if he was prepared to back up his words by, committing to sanction Israel for the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. I got no response, unsurprisingly. So it's important to, bear in mind that he didn't commit to any kind of meaningful action to back up his rhetorical opposition, but at least he did come out and say, Carney did, that this is wrong and that Canada doesn't support it. I also have not seen anything, I should say, from the other candidate. I don't think she's going to win the Liberal Party leadership, but I'm talking here about Chrystia Freeland, who has lavishly supported Israel's genocidal regime throughout her political career. As far as I know, she didn't express any opposition to this either. Only Carney did.
We have a question from Ram Plents01 who says, "Where's the prosecution of Blinken?"
Yeah, I've been asking that question for a year. The so-called prosecutor of the ICC, Karim Khan QC, who was promoted to that position with the enthusiastic support of Boris Johnson's Conservative government in the United Kingdom. Karim Khan is a British barrister. He has absolutely no excuse for not indicting Blinken. He has absolutely no excuse for not indicting Biden, Sullivan, Lloyd Austin. They are clearly, if you take the position as the ICC prosecutor, as he has, that Gallant, the former defense minister of Israel's genocidal regime, and Netanyahu are guilty of crimes against humanity, and you have a mountain of evidence in front of you that the only way they could have committed those crimes is with the munitions provided to them by Western states and primarily by the United States, you have absolutely no justification for not indicting the leaders of these countries. There's ample evidence that they knew exactly what Israel was doing and was going to do with the munitions they were providing, and they continue to provide them anyways. As some of you may have noticed, the Trump administration just sanctioned the International Criminal Court. And Marco Rubio, in an interview he gave recently, he said repeatedly that he thought that the indictment of Netanyahu and Gallant by the ICC was a trial run, and that if the ICC got away with this, they were then going to come after Americans. So I think what's going on here is very simple. It's not based in any way, shape, or form on the law or on the evidence. It's all about the ICC being concerned about retribution from the United States government. That's why Blinken has not been indicted. And that's why Karim Khan is very unlikely to ever try to prosecute him.
This is a pretty good question here. It is by 09 Falconeye, who says, "Seemingly Abbas is useless as a leader for the Palestinians. Why are they not able to remove him for someone that supports them?"
What do you think about that, Rami?
Well, the first of all is the Palestinian resistance in Gaza have been extremely critical of the PA, of course, but they've insisted in not pursuing internal fighting, at least not while the genocide is happening. And that was specifically the case in Jenin, where the lines of Jenin were, I'm not even sure if they were actually even fighting back against the Palestinian Authority, while they themselves were getting shot at by the Palestinian Authority, because the intent is not to fall in Israel's trap, or even the Palestinian Authority's trap, of turning this into bigger chaos. But let's keep in mind that the Palestinian Authority has lost all form of legitimacy within Palestinians. There are some parts of Palestine that Abbas can't even go visit because he's not welcome. And also the dynamics of the Palestinian Authority are quite complicated, in the sense where many people live off of off of financial support from the Palestinian Authority. They're either employees of the big bureaucracy. So this is not me forgiving them, but just saying that these are the dynamics. Is that right now the Palestinians are trying to be fully focused in staying on the real enemy, and by resisting Israel, you are in some way as well resisting the Palestinian Authority, because the Palestinian Authority represents only Israel and not the Palestinians. It's the good cop in the whole good cop, bad cop dynamics.
Right. I just want to point out, just add to what you said, there have been various polls done about sentiment towards the Palestinian Authority and Hamas in Gaza and the West Bank. So there was, for example, a poll done, or the results of it were released in September of last year by the Palestinian Center for Policy and Research. Let me just scroll through here and find the numbers for you. As in our previous three polls since October 7th, most of the questions in this poll covering the third quarter of 2024 revolve around the events of that day. And they say, while a majority continues to view Hamas's decision to carry out the October 7th attack as correct, that majority is now smaller than it has been since the first poll. The majority of the public continues to believe the attack and the following war have placed Palestinian issue at center of the global attention. And a majority of 57% says that when the war ends, Gaza will remain under Hamas control. This percentage drops to 37% in the Gaza Strip, of Gazans saying Hamas will actually control the area, compared to a much higher percentage, 70% in the West Bank. And then then there's satisfaction with performance of various parties during the war. And they say, we asked in the current poll about public satisfaction with the role played during the war by various Palestinian, Arab, regional, and international actors. On the Palestinian side, satisfaction with Hamas's performance was at 61%, 75% in the West Bank, and 39% in the Gaza Strip, followed by Yahya Sinwar, 54%. Overall, 70% in the West Bank and 29% in the Gaza Strip. And interestingly, as for satisfaction with Arab regional actors, the highest satisfaction rate went to Yemen. We found in our previous polls today it's 69%, 78% in the West Bank and 56% in the Gaza Strip, followed by Hezbollah. And support for various Palestinian factions. When asked which political party or movement they support, the largest percentage, 36%, said they prefer Hamas, followed by Fatah, 21%, 6% selected third parties, and 29% said they do not support any of them or do not know. So you can see there that the Palestinian Authority isn't exactly commanding a lot of popularity in Gaza or the West Bank.
We have an interesting question about Syria, Dimitri, but I think we could maybe take a few more about Palestine and then move on to Syria.
Why don't we take a question about Syria now? That's fine.
Okay, sounds good. So the question, let me see if I can find it, is, are you seeing the reports of the massacres of Alawites and Shiites in Syria? It's hard to know what's really going on in Syria now that the Western media has already moved on.
I have seen reports, Sarah, and I can't, vouch for them, unfortunately. I think it's very, very difficult for any of us living outside of Syria at this stage to know exactly what's going on. One person I recommend to you is an insightful observer about what is currently going on in Syria, who follows these reports very carefully, is Kirvork Almasian, who is from Aleppo. Now lives in Germany. I've interviewed him 2 or 3 times on Reason to Resist. And he believes that there is abundant evidence of massacres being committed by HTS and affiliated jihadis against Alawites not just Alawites, but also Christians and people who served or who are alleged to have served in the Syrian army prior to the fall of Assad. But I myself can't really comment on the veracity of these reports.
But I've also been reading reports of groups forming to resist HTS's presence in certain parts of Syria. So, I mean, I don't want to turn the page too quickly on what's happening in Syria. Things might change very, very quickly. And I think it's very naive to think that Syrians will accept to live under this regime for so long. So I don't know. I still have hope for a better Syria, one that is not in the hands of Israel. So this is a question from Wendy Gofton, who says, is it possible for the Global South to hold a Nuremberg 2.0 as the West won't do a damn thing? But Dimitri, just to maybe extend on this question, you know how there was these, I hate to use this example, Dimitri, but the Uyghurs ran a genocide trial against China in just as a show trial, let's just say. Do you think there's any value in maybe doing like a show trial against Israel, knowing they will not attend, of course, but just to fully show all the evidence that we have, and to, I mean, you know this better than me, Dimitri, so I'll let you know.
I would, you know, depending on how it's done, I wouldn't refer to it as a show trial. If it actually involves, you know, the application of rules of due process, you know, rules about what evidence is credible and not credible, and various witnesses of diverse points of view, expert witnesses, fact witnesses are invited to testify under oath, and they're subjected to cross-examination. That can be a very, very useful exercise. Extremely important, as a matter of fact, especially if you can get the media to cover it. But if it's, but at the end of the day, whether the Global South can hold a Nuremberg 2.0, I mean, and they can certainly hold trials in absentia. There's nothing to stop them from doing that. In absentia is just a fancy, you know, phrase for the accused is not present because they haven't been, you know, apprehended and brought to the court to face trial. And I think the reality is, you know, that if the Global South were to hold a Nuremberg 2.0, it's very unlikely that they would be able to apprehend Israeli war criminals and others who are complicit in the genocide, and it would end up being a trial in absentia. Still, there's utility in that. It's you know, if it's done properly, it's important and very useful exercise. But the real thing we all want to see is these people brought to justice. And unless and until the West stops protecting them, Western governments, they're not likely to be brought to justice.
So maybe one last question, which is from Arso AGG. How could China, Russia legally stop the removal of Palestinians by US if they were not able to stop the killing? Are there different legal options?
Well, they have an obligation as signatories. It's not just options. They have an obligation, as do all signatories to the Genocide Convention, to prevent genocide. And they really have to use all lawful means at their disposal. So they could and should impose sanctions, not just on Israel, but also on those who facilitate the genocide or the ethnic cleansing. And here I'm talking particularly about the United States. They should indict these people. They should also be prosecuting people, you know, who, there are a lot of people in Israel, citizens of Israel, who support what Israel is doing and who are participating in what Israel is doing to the Palestinians, who are citizens of Russia. And, you know, the Russian Federation, in my opinion, has an obligation to prosecute these people under the Genocide Convention. So there are prosecutions in the domestic legal system, economic sanctions, you know, potentially also military intervention, but that would be very, very dangerous because, of course, you're dealing with two states, the United States and Israel, that have nuclear weapons, and their leaders are, frankly, insane. So I don't know that there is, you know, a means by which China or Russia could intervene militarily that wouldn't imperil the future of humanity. That's just the sad reality. But there's still a lot they can do by means of economic sanctions, using their domestic legal systems, supporting Security Council resolutions, condemning Israel and the United States for what they're doing. And those measures can have a real impact. And I hope that the United States, that China and the Russian Federation will become more assertive in the weeks and months ahead in terms of backing up their condemnations with real action.
We had this question by Isn't Real, who says, what about civil cases against all the corporations?
Yes.
We have, there's Elbit Systems that is registered in the United States. They clearly are complicit in this genocide. Is there any way that we could bring these companies to trial?
There is. I mean, the problem we have in the West, and this is one where, this has been attempted in Canada. There was a corporation that was involved in, allegedly involved in settlement construction in the West Bank, a Canadian corporation. And a class action was brought against that corporation in Quebec, in the Quebec Superior Court. And the Quebec Superior Court dismissed the case on the basis of a doctrine called forum non-convenience. So basically, under this doctrine, forum non-convenience just means, the convenient or inconvenient forum. So what the court will do in that situation, applying this doctrine, they'll say, okay, we have jurisdiction over this defendant because it's a Canadian corporation, but is this a case that we should decline to adjudicate because there's another forum out there that is a clearly superior forum? And the decision they came to in that case was that Israel was a clearly superior forum for adjudicating the claim against this Canadian corporation for complicity in these war crimes of settlement construction. I believe the decision was preposterous because it was premised on the belief that the Israeli courts would render a fair decision in judging in adjudicating whether this Canadian corporation was complicit in war crimes. I think that was a fantasy, frankly, but those are the kinds of challenges you confront in Western courts: is persuading the courts that they have jurisdiction over these corporations and that they should exercise that jurisdiction.
But Dimitri, can you appeal this and bring it to the Supreme Court to truly get a real judgment behind this question?
Well, you would, in the first instance, you would appeal it to the Court of Appeal. If the court dismissed the case based on the lower court, based on forum non-convenience, you would go to the Court of Appeal. And if the Court of Appeal didn't give you, give the decision you're seeking, you could ask the Supreme Court of Canada to adjudicate it. But the Supreme Court of Canada, you have to get permission, and in something like 85% of applications for leave to appeal at Supreme Court of Canada, the Supreme Court of Canada says we're not interested in hearing this appeal. So whether, even if you got the Supreme Court of Canada to hear it, is the Supreme Court of Canada going to be willing to adjudicate claims against Canadian corporations that are complicit in these crimes? Maybe, but it would be a challenge, in my opinion.
And that comes back to one of the questions we had in one of our previous streams, which is, do you believe we have a fair justice system here in Canada?
No.
But yeah. Dimitri, should we wrap this up?
Sure. Yeah, we've been going for 90 minutes. Thank you very much, everybody. As I mentioned, I'll be in Lebanon next week. I hope Rami will join me. We'll be doing some on-the-ground reporting. Tomorrow we're going to publish an interview I did today with a person by the name of Charlotte Cates, who is the international director, or was the international director of the Samidoun Palestinian Solidarity Network, which last year was declared by the United States and Canadian governments to be a terrorist entity. And she herself has been arrested. She hasn't been charged with anything, but she was arrested. Her home was ransacked in Vancouver. And if you watch, you'll hear all about what happened to her and Samidoun. We'll be doing some more reporting on the Palestine Palestine situation later this week.
Folks, make sure to subscribe to our channel, the Patreon, Substack, Telegram, Twitter, and all the good stuff. So I think next week, same time, or we'll figure it out. Make sure to follow the Twitter channel and the YouTube channel to make sure that you can attend our next live stream. Here, folks.
Thank you, everybody. Peace to you all, and thanks for tuning in.